And as you can see, the bench yet to take position, but the bar is in place, and very shortly we should be able to hear this second round of a court battle kick off proper, with two petitioners now challenging President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election. In studio with me is Joy Mudiva. She's an advocate of the High Court, and Joseph Simeha, and I thank you both for staying with us. It's difficult to navigate through this without sub judice, but we must, because we don't want to end up in jail. Yes. So, true that. True that. Exactly. So let's just talk about the political environment a little bit, and the extent to which, Joy, you believe that both actors in the political contest, or rather the two main actors in the political contest, I should say, will be bound by the decision of this court. I mean, on the one hand, we've had NAS already say, look, we didn't even recognize this so-called election that happened, so why are we in court to begin with? No election took place. There should be, a transitional government until an election as envisioned by the Constitution can be held and organized. So how does that sound like to you? Does it build confidence that they are absolutely bound by what the court says?
They are bound by what the court says, and even if for their own political expediency right now this process is inconvenient, it does not really excuse them from being bound by whatever the outcome will be, because suffice it to say, if either of the petitions are successful, then we could see a situation where we're either going back to a fresh election or there's an order of recount. So there must be an order that would come out that the political actors must react to. Now, even if you say, I do not want to participate, you actually do have an interest in what the outcome is. On the other hand, I think for me as a lawyer and as a jurist, I am happy that this process is happening, because, like I said earlier, it will not only help us clarify some of those gray areas, it will also help us set the ground rules for moving forward. Because this time around, if what we saw in the last 60 days leading up to the process we are in now was the intrigues, the twists, the turns, it became withdrawal. What does withdrawal mean? Does it mean now there's fresh nominations that are needed? What does, for example, fresh elections mean? Does it mean the other one did not happen? Is it completely expunged? So this is an opportunity for us to sort of lay the ground rules and also build on what has already been laid down in terms of moving forward, so that the court can actually clarify exactly what these issues mean. But the other thing that I also hope that comes out of this politically is for the players to understand that the only way to challenge elections is through this process. And I'm hoping that this will sound a death knell to not just there's always room for public participation and agitation and demonstration, yes, but that even the electorate will tell the lawyers, the leaders, look, go exhaust this process first, because this is the process that actually yields results that matter, so that you reserve these others for causes that have got no legal recourse. Because what we were entertained to in the run-up to this election was sort of parallel systems trying to arrive at the same conclusion. Right. And yet only one process would have an outcome that would be satisfactory with finality. Because even as it stands right now, what you're talking earlier about saying a transition government, or all these things have to look for backing in the law. We'll talk about people's assemblies and direct exercise of power. All these things have to find backing in the law. So even with Jubilee saying that now they're preparing for an inauguration, all these things have to find backing in the law. So until Kenyans realize that the law is the last bastion, then they'll start demanding of the leaders a higher premium and say, look, if you've tried everything and everything has failed, then come back and tell us now that you go out and agitate. Because in my opinion, the masses have been used to rally for causes that weren't necessarily for the benefit of the ruling elite. And I think for some people, they have suffered loss as a result. They have lost people, their family members, they have lost businesses, they have lost opportunities. And at the end of the day, nobody is coming from their political rally to feed you. It is you who has to take care of yourself. So it's good that Kenyans are saying, look, this is where the rubber actually meets the road. And moving forward, let's exhaust this first before we start affecting our other life. And I'm hoping that this is the education that the Kenyans are getting through this process right now.
Right, Joseph.
No, actually, I want to respectfully disagree with Joy and dissuade Kenyans from following her advice.
Why?
Getting that education that the only recourse is in the law. No, of course the law.
The first line of recourse must be the law.
Well, when you are petitioning, when we look at petitioning an outcome of a process, it is the law. But when you look at what NASA has been putting forth, it is not just the outcome of an election, but is one, the environment in which an election can happen and the management of that election. So there's a gamut of things that you cannot take all of them to a court of law. In fact, for some of them, it doesn't even have, it won't even give you an answer. It doesn't even have a response. People have kept asking, is that in the Constitution? Some things actually are not in the Constitution.
That's
but
right.
does it mean that we as a society cannot do anything about those things that are not in the Constitution? I've been challenging people who come up with that, who love to make that, throw that statement in the air, that, okay, it's not in the situation in Nyeri is not in the Constitution, where you lose a governor at the beginning of his term, or his or her term, and as the Constitution says, the deputy takes over.
Right.
Constitution doesn't say anything about what happens. Does he or she appoint another deputy? Do we elect? Do we? And isn't there a gap? Isn't there a gap there? There is a gap there. So as society, we must not tie ourselves to these very narrow confines of the law, outside of the context of society in which we live. We must ask ourselves, when we face challenges in society and we cannot find solutions in the Constitution or in law, what do we do? And this is why
even that argument presupposes that that's your first stop.
The law is the
law
first stop.
And
yeah, he's making a point for me. That's
the law
why
is your
I'm
first
nodding.
The law is first stop, but you don't get stuck there.
Don't get stuck
and
there.
And it's not mutually the law and political activity are not mutually exclusive. For as long as that political activity is lawful and constitutional, you can be in court prosecuting a matter, and you can agitate in the streets and wherever else, and petition and so on, if in your opinion what you are prosecuting in court is as a result of a faulty environment, a larger faulty environment that you cannot take to court, a larger faulty architecture that you cannot take to court and get any solution. So if you look at the agitation, it has been to do with electoral justice. When you take a petition into court like Njonjo and Khelef have done, yes, you achieve a bit because there will be clarity. Hopefully, the Supreme Court will give us clarity on principles of the Constitution, principles of law, the procedure and the processes and so on. But that's not enough. There's a lot more that has been raised in terms of the weaknesses, which actually, if you like, NASA and Jubilee side also agree that, yeah, there is a problem we need to sort out. Only there's disagreement on how to go about it. So my argument is that these two are not mutually exclusive. You can pursue the matter legally, but if this matter is as a result of a larger fault, in your opinion, you can also pursue it through political activity, agitation, petitioning, and so on and so forth, including to make it possible for courts of law to make decisions in a conducive environment. Because again, that's one of the things that has been raised. The moment you see courts being intimidated and so on, you don't leave it, you don't go back to the same courts. You know, it's like in this country, police beat you up, and when you talk about it, the same police tell you, but did you come to report to us? We beat you up, and then we say, for that allegation to be valid, sometimes in full glare of cameras, TV cameras, the police say, no, we don't have any report.
Let's talk about that a little bit more in depth. The point that you've just made about including the issue of courts being able to make their decisions in a free environment. Are you saying that this environment right now is not necessarily free in your estimation? No.
I'm saying I wouldn't make just that kind of blanket statement, but we have seen evidence. And by the way, it is one of the things I've just been looking at the papers now. It's one of the grounds upon which is one of the grounds that Njonjo and Khelef will be arguing in court. Intimidation from the president and the executive generally of the judiciary, that it does affect the integrity, the validity of the electoral process, because the electoral process does not end at the ballot box. When there's no dispute, it ends there. But now courts become part of it when there's a dispute, as they are now. So if you intimidate courts of law, you engage in acts that can be interpreted as intimidation of judicial officers, you are actually also affecting the electoral process and the integrity of the outcome of that process. Meaning that if this finishes at the Supreme Court and it makes a decision in either way, it could as well, you may not persuade some people that that decision was not made because the judges were afraid, for example. There's a possibility. So we have seen actions in this country that must make us afraid, because they ought not to happen in a civilized society. Every one of us needs to leave institutions of state the space to do their work.
And following that thought then, the intimidation that we saw on the streets of Chiloba must also be part of a civilized society, where even when you're petitioning and you're agitating, it is not with the view of intimidating an independent body to an extent of demanding for people to be removed from work unconstitutionally and unprocedurally, and then still claim that they did not do the function independently, and yet the political players are part of the intimidation process. If we are talking about respect of our institutions, let it cut across the board. We respect the judiciary, we respect the executive, we respect the independent commissions, and moving forward, even respect the Kenyan people to only ask them to do that which nobody else can do. For example, if we're talking about electoral justice, that's why we have elected representatives, 290 of them plus others on top, to sit in parliament and pass laws. But what happens? Jubilee comes, they want to push their tyranny. NASA decides we are not going to participate in that process. So why are we paying the lot of you if you're not going to pass laws that will bring this equity, if you're not going to have those discussions? Now we are talking about having people's assemblies. We have county assemblies, we'll have people's assemblies. Who's going to fund all this? Which one is going to hold sway at the end of the day? We need to come to a place where we don't speak from both ends of our mouth, especially the politicians. If we respect the law, let us respect the law. If we are a country under the rule of law, let's be a country under the rule of law. But if we want to be using the people power to drive changes, sometimes it comes back to bite us, because the times when you want the law to protect you, you've already set precedent for people to take the law into their own hands, and that becomes the rise of anarchy.
You know, Joy, I think the comparison you make, whereas I agree with the principle, absolutely agree with the principle that respect for institutions and so on must cut across the board, the comparison you make, I think, is erroneous. Because it can never be the same thing that there are citizens in the streets agitating against a public officer. Citizens, ordinary citizens agitating against a public officer cannot be compared to a president of a republic threatening another public officer. Those two things...
Calling somebody Mkora is hardly a threat.
Those two things, for me, you cannot compare.
It's an insult.
Just calling somebody...
It's an insult.
Mkora is a threat. It may be an insult, but it's not
No, it's not. It went beyond calling the judges Wakora. It went to telling them that we will revisit. It went to telling them that Maraga will know that now I am a sitting president, and so on and so forth. These are things on record. So I do not think you can compare these two.
To the public on the street.
Yes, and I don't think, in my opinion, you can fault a member of the public who is allowed by the same law, when you are a public officer, to agitate as he or she does against you, when they think that what you are doing has brought you the public office that you occupy in disgrace. I do not think you can then say that they do not have a right, they are disrespecting the institution. I think we must differentiate. In fact, the
law gives the process by which we can discipline errant officers, how we can remove errant. That law is in place. It's not like that, and that's the point I've been making. Where there exists a mechanism, let us use that mechanism. But putting people in harm's way, calling them out to make things ungovernable for the exclusive benefit of the political class, in my opinion, I find very objectionable. It's one of those things. For example, when we were going in the streets in 1992, prior to 92, in the 90s, when we were agitating for multi-party democracy, that time there was no law to allow multi-party democracy. The only way was for us to go out in the streets. And that time, even some of us, as young as I was happy to participate in those things, and were very happy with the repeal of Section 2A. But now that the mechanism has been opened up, especially the political class need to learn to use the law and not just talk about the law when it suits them. Because what has happened is those children who are 10, 12 in 2007, 2008 during post-election violence have now come to a place where even in 2017 is the same thing. In their minds, when they have an electoral dispute, it can only be sorted if we go out in the street and agitate. And it's a bad culture to pass along to our youngsters. We need to come to a place, especially as the adults in the situation, for us to use the laid down procedure. Why? Because we are in this mess, and I've said it here before and I will repeat it again, because we allowed the politicals to run out the Isakasan Commission. When that happened, we've done what the courts have been doing. When you allow an illegality to stand, from special circumstances to pay people off and to bring in new people in, you put in your mind that the next time I'm not happy with this team, we go the same route, we agitate, we'll get this out. This commission was chosen, the current commission was chosen by religious leaders under special circumstances. Now, when they are failing at their first hurdle, we start blaming them. And yet, they were barely in the job since February. So we have to come to a place where let our laws matter, let processes matter, let everybody follow the processes. If we get to Mushoalami and there's no other legal route out of this, then call people out.
Kabro will do.
Okay, yes, Kabro has to do that.
No, I ought to respond to that.
I know you do, Joseph. I just want to point out the fact that it's now, we're about an hour into what we expected, should have been the formal commencement of this proceedings. And by the way, what usually is going on when this court takes this much time? Remember the 6:30 a.m. joke? I, for one, was looking forward to that. Yeah, but so here we are again. The judges haven't taken position. What do you think could be holding them up? I know I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball, and I see you didn't carry it today, but
like we could, just by observing, through experience, by observing what happened even just yesterday.
Right.
For example, initially yesterday they had arranged that they would start with the pre-trial conference in the morning, and then by 2 they start with the interlocutory applications.
Right.
But then for whatever reason, they switched around and began with the applications, and they thought, what, we'll just need about 2 to 3 hours, and we'll finish these applications, deliver rulings by 2 o'clock, and start with the pre-trial conference. But you saw how it ended up being. They took the entire day. So sometimes probably an underestimation of the weight of the matter that they have, the documents they have to look through, the arguments that have to be made. Sometimes you cannot predict totally how your court will run, because then parties have to be heard. You cannot be seen to be denying any party that's a legitimate right to be heard before you. So yes, you try to limit time-wise so that you manage time strictly, but it's too tricky. The line is thin, I think, because again, you cannot be seen to be going against the principles of justice that allow every party to be heard, every party that deserves to be heard to be heard.
But at this point, we should expect that they have read through all. Hopefully everything that has been submitted, right? Hopefully
they have translated. It's a lot of documents, huge documents. Hopefully they have translated, and they still didn't manage to go through the entire trove that they need for the applications, because this morning they ought to be delivering the decisions on applications and then beginning the hearing proper. So for as long as they've not, because what is substantive is not so much that be there at 10. It's a matter of process, but it's important. But what is substantive, have you made a fair, just, objective consideration of the case before you and made a determination? And that has to wait for now, if that clashes with time, time has to suffer. If the case cannot suffer, time must then suffer. So that could be, I'm only guessing, that could be what is happening. What is holding up the judges?
What is holding them up? I made a habit of starting my court processes at 10 o'clock. Because I was very particular about not carrying judgments home. So if I did not finish writing rulings and judgments the day before, in the morning, that's what I would do before I go to court. So probably they have some rulings and some determinations that they didn't do the previous night. They were tired, they decided to go home and give it a rest. And that's what they started with this morning. And it's one of the things that, like Simeka says, even if you allocate time, if you find it's impossible, there's no adventure of coming there and mumbling and saying things that don't make sense. You'd rather keep people waiting a little bit, but when you come out, you actually have got something substantive to say. And how much of this relies on the judges actually, being together to work on it? Or is this just, homework, everybody go home with your file and, meet? Is there a part of this process that actually requires them to be together to deliberate? Because there are times you hear that, like the DCJ says, and this is a unanimous decision, meaning there has been some sort of conference on the issue. So you may find that only one judge may be told, okay, you go write this ruling. But they've had that discussion and said, what do you think about this? Yeah, I think this one can wait for that. So one person may do the actual penning, but it is a considered position. But one thing I also hope that Kenyans will learn to do, which you also alluded to, these bulky documents serve no adventure than to vex the spirit and to weary the soul. When you look at somebody coming in with a suitcase full of documents,
but does serve to intimidate the other side, doesn't it?
No, but it wearies the judges more, because the other side can choose to pick and choose which parts they're going to highlight. The judges are expected to go through all this and through your opponent's responses and through your responses to the responses of your opponent. If Kenyans could learn to do like what you see in other jurisdictions, the positions are usually 2-3 pages. It's something that is just clear, succinct. Tell us what it is you want determined, and don't come with 16 prayers. Choose your 3 best ones, argue those well, and achieve a result. But when you come with an adventure from here to Timbuktu, sometimes they become so wary, like we saw last time. It was humanly impossible to go through all the documents. And then now you even wonder, so how did they arrive at a decision and they didn't go through the documents? There's something to be said for brevity. Sometimes when you're clear and succinct, you actually get your point across better than when you're very wordy. But
we all, you know, just assume it's Times New Roman font 24, and it isn't all that much content. What do you want to say?
I can see. Yeah, I'm looking at you because Joy said some very weighty things that I ought to respond to.
Go ahead.
I can see you steering us away from that.
No, not at all. So, you kept looking at the screen and I keep thinking,
that's why I'm resisting.
A judge coming in.
No, I was resisting.
Please don't resist me. You have your time. One eye was there. I think we all sort of glanced at our previous screen and thought that the judges had walked in, but that hasn't happened. So please, yes, Joy was talking. Let's just refresh what she was talking about. Yes.
What does it mean to disrespect public institutions? What does it mean to act according to the law? To do things according to the law. If you are unhappy with the public officer, what does it mean when
you say
Don't
resist me, Joseph.
Okay, I withdraw my
resistance. Just withdraw that fist. Thank you. Now you can make your point. Okay.
And I'm not going to advise my followers to resist you.
No.
Okay. So I was saying that I disagree with Joy. In fact, I'm glad she's not a carpenter, because if she was, she would cut such a tiny table at which we partake of the rights that we've been given by the Constitution and the law. Because in my opinion, her interpretation is so narrow that if the law says this is how you remove this officer, there can be no other way you can express your dissatisfaction with the performance of that officer. I will give you examples without being specific on people's names. I suppose all of us know of a public officer who forged degree papers, who is in office illegally, who has been found by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Ombudsman Office, and all manner of offices, but he's in office. Isn't the law failing us? How come it's not being removed in accordance with the law? We know many other public officers, including MPs, including very senior officers of government, where there is procedure according to the law on how to remove them. We cannot, in my opinion, confine ourselves to that, whereas the Constitution also gives us other means to express our displeasure, to actually bring pressure to bear upon those who should remove that person. So that pressure is not meant just at the IEBC officials. That pressure was also meant at those who ought to take some action, who the Constitution and ourselves, by delegation of our powers and our sovereignty, have given authority to do something about that situation. Because those people sit in office as public officers in our behalf, not in their own behalf. They don't have a right, a personal right to those jobs. If you want that, go into business. But when you go into public office, you are going to serve the public, and therefore you must expect expectations in terms of performance. They begin on day one. We will not excuse you because you were employed yesterday when you get into public office. You start serving us from day one, because we will also pay you from day one. We will not suspend our paying you until you get used to the jobs one year down the line.
Right.
So people also need to understand the meaning of public office. We have this, we go into public office with private mentalities, that this is my job. So that is Chiloba's job. He has a right to it. Don't agitate against him. It's not Chiloba, it's the public officer called CEO of the IEBC.
But to be fair, the coffins had Chiloba's name.
Yes, of course.
The burning effigies.
People know the CEO as Chiloba,
yes.
People know the CEO as Chiloba.
Yeah.
For as long as these people are citizens of the Republic of Kenya, the people who pay taxes, people who have a legitimate right to expect certain level of services.
Bare minimums.
Exactly, bare minimums. They have a right to go on the streets and agitate for as long as their agitation is within the law.
And
so
as
for
much
me,
as I'm not a carpenter, thank you for making my point for me. Because because small table or not, you have pointed out exactly what I'm trying to say. Those people who need to be out of office and are still in office, why are they still in office? We've done this thing with our politicians where they are waheshimiwa. There's some place up there elevated above, they're hovering above the ground. And so when somebody is challenged, they are too big to fail. I mean, you say if you touch that politician, the fire that will come after you. The people have also been conditioned that if you try to hold somebody to personal account, it is we who are being attacked. It is not somebody, we're not dealing with Joy as an individual who has failed an integrity test. Now we are dealing with the Luya community. Because now this is a Luya woman who's being attacked, so it is the Luyas. How is it the Luyas and it's me who's the forger? Right. So we need to come to a place where we learn to hang our politicians out to dry. There's nobody who should be too big to fail. If we find that you have had an opportunity, look at what happened in the UK last week. They lost 2 ministers. One ended up committing suicide because he was caught in a sex scandal. The other one, because of her arrogance, lost her job and gave Kenya Airways a lot of publicity.
Go Kenya Airways.
So, and it is because people have come to a place where they have placed an expectation on their leaders that if you don't meet that expectation, even if you're a minister, you're not too big to fail. In Kenya, we've made our politicians almost Muheshimiwa, Muheshimiwa. I wish we came to a place where we don't call them Muheshimiwa. We call you an MP, a senator. What are you? Yes. You're an MP, you're MP Joy. The moment you're no longer MP, you go back to being Miss Joy. Yes. Because when we give people Muheshimiwa, this kind of deference, it makes them also imagine that they're somehow above the law. And that's why they get away with rape, murder, and manslaughter, figuratively.
And sometimes literally.
And sometimes literally,
yeah,
yes.
But Joseph, I just want to follow up on what you said about the ones that we know who should not be in these offices, yet the law provides for that to take place. To what extent then is it, I don't want to say the fault of the citizenry, but the law is there, the provisions are there, and if people applied those laws, then these people would be out of office. So it isn't that the law is in workings, that it has not been, can I say, moved to act.
Yeah, you could actually say that. Joy puts it very well. The only place I disagree with her is that we should excuse the lesser ones because the bigger ones are enjoying this privilege and codes of impunity.
No, I'm not saying excuse. I'm saying all of them should.
As citizen, yes, but a citizen is beginning with where they achieve some victory, just some victory. They will move to the next, and they will move to the next. The next thing, if these people don't behave, we will remove a president through the streets if they do not behave. So I will not fault any citizen because they are agitating against some director who forged certificates and is sticking in office, just because they fail to do the same thing with a powerful politician. I will say, go ahead, test that victory, remove that guy through the streets.
To build confidence.
Build confidence of the citizens to be reminded that the sovereign power is yours. These people are in public office serving you. When you have removed this lesser one, the next time go for a bigger one, and so on and so forth.
Could the confidence equally be built by go to court or have, you know, the legal
I say they are not mutually exclusive. These two processes are not mutually exclusive.
That's how we agree.
Someone will go to court, and others can choose. You pursue this matter in court for us as we pursue in the streets. Just finally, the thing you ask about the law, failure is political goodwill. When it is serving certain interests, and this is where I will agree with you, when it's serving certain political interests, the law is actually is not useful for us. We can ignore it. And that, as citizens, again, we ought to fight it. Next time, today is Chiloba, tomorrow it will be those in charge of the executive or legislature.
An hour and 15 minutes past the time we expect them to sit. They are now in place. Let's take you straight to the Supreme Court.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are sorry we are starting late. It's something beyond our control. We have to finish with the rulings. So we would like to start with the remaining rulings so that we are able to move on. I want to give this chance to just Sojong to read the rulings, yes.
This is the application by Mr. Stephen Owoko Oganga, and this is the ruling of the court. The applicant has moved...
Is he here? Okay.
The applicant has moved this court by application by way of his notice of motion dated the 13th of November 2017. A citizen and registered voter from Biashara Ward in Nakuru East constituency in the Great Rift Valley, the applicant has resorted to the umbrella of a petition that was lodged by a non-governmental organization, the Institute for Democratic Governance, which was making a case against not only the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission as the duly mandated organizer of the presidential election of the 26th of October 2017, but also against the principles of the political coalition, NASA, which had elected not to take part in the said presidential election. What is the meritorious basis for the applicant calling upon this court to intervene in relation to the presidential election of the 26th of October 2017 and with those associated with NASA as respondents? The applicant asked to be enjoined as a respondent in the petition by the Institute for Democratic Governance. He asked to be granted leave to file and serve his papers of support of the non-governmental organization's petition aforesaid. What are the applicant's grounds? Firstly, the applicant avers that the Supreme Court presidential election petition rules, in particular Rule 22, are a basis for such an application. Secondly, he avers that he is a registered voter, and therefore the matter which names certain particular individuals as respondents, quote, directly affects him as an individual and as a matter of public interest, end of quote. Thirdly, the applicant avows that he, quote, understands the presidential election procedure on monitoring and evaluation and the whole system and how it was supposed to work, end of quote, especially as he himself, quote, was to vie as an independent presidential candidate, end of quote. Fourthly, the applicant states that he is, quote, the chairman of the independent candidates lobby group that was involved in training agents overseeing the general elections, end of quote. Such essentially are the grounds whereupon the rest of the applicant's case that this court should formally commit itself to entertaining his case as a respondent alongside that of the various individuals whom the Institute for Democratic Governance had chosen to list down as respondents without any formal signal of consent from them. As already recorded, the Supreme Court's time and other resources are at this moment gravely strained, yet must be deployed in essential courses of service to the Kenyan people. There is necessarily an obligation of judicial conscientiousness, which at this time dictates that the court must decline to take on those courses that run contrary to the public interest. and that make none but nominal endowment to the true cause of dispute settlement. The instant application falls squarely in the said category of tendencies negating the court's service commitment. Accordingly, the instant application is hereby dismissed, and its costs shall devolve to the applicant, and the court makes orders accordingly. He will meet costs. Yeah, he will bear the cost.
The other one will be read by Justice Wanjala.
There are two applications. The first one is by Mr. Caleb Wamaya, who has applied to be admitted as an interested party. We have considered the arguments made which are attached to his application, and we are of the view that the applicant has not demonstrated that he has an identifiable stake in the present petition. Neither has he demonstrated that he will be prejudiced if he is not enjoined as a party. Taking into consideration the issues he raises have already been addressed by the parties. Having considered the application along those lines, by a unanimous decision of the court, we find that the applicant does not qualify to be joined as an interested party, and we decline to admit him as such. There will be no order as to costs. The next is the application by the petitioners in presidential election petition number 4 of 2017, wherein the applicants seek orders for scrutiny. The application contains 20 prayers in all. We have considered this application. We have also considered the affidavits in support and opposition to the application. We have paid due regard to the oral submissions by counsel for the petitioners and the respondents. And in arriving at the orders we are about to make, we have been guided by the principles laid down by this court in the Peter Gatirao Munya case regarding applications and orders for scrutiny. We are further guided by our ruling of 28th October 2017 in Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka versus IBC and others, wherein following an application for scrutiny by petitioners in that petition, this court further clarified the grounds upon which an order for scrutiny may be granted or partially granted or declined altogether. Pursuant to the foregoing, by unanimous decision of this court, we make the following orders. The second respondent is hereby ordered to grant access to all original Forms 34A, Forms 34B, and Form 34C to the petitioners herein, in accordance with prayer number 14 in that application. The second respondent is also to avail a certified copy of the voter register to the petitioners at the cost of the latter. That means the petitioners, and this is in accord with the prayer number 17. The remaining prayers are hereby declined. The said prayers have been declined on the basis of very cogent grounds, which will be elaborated in a detailed version of this ruling to be issued by the court at a later date. Some of the prayers have been declined due to the sheer impracticability of their implementation, given the short time left for the determination of the petitions at hand. Others have been declined because they were not pleaded with sufficient particularity in the petition. Yet others were declined on grounds that they are couched in such general terms as to be no more than fishing expeditions. Orders accordingly.
Thank you, Justice Wanjala. Give him the microphone.
Your Lordships, I want to say this. I have a feeling that you've been too cruel to my application. Because for one reason, this is an application that was filed on 7th. It was lodged on the same day of 7th of 11th, 2017. As I had said yesterday, it was an ex parte. Nobody had, no party was opposed to it. But then, I've not been allowed to canvass my application. And therefore, my rights have not been enforced. Your Lordships, I have a feeling that I've been discriminated. Could it be just because I was representing myself? And for that reason, I feel Article 1 that talks of the preamble, Article 10, the national values and principles of governance, Article 22, that talks of Article 22, sub-Article 1, that talks of the enforcement of the Bill of Rights, 27, that talks of discrimination, and 47, that talks of fair administrative action, and 50, that talks of a fair hearing. All the Constitution has been abused and infringed on. It's unfortunate my application has not been allowed to be enjoined, but for that matter, I'm going home a disappointed person. I'm going home when I knew this was the last resort court, having been denied my rights by the IBC. Now the same rights are being denied by the highest court in the land. Your Lordships, it's unfair, it's too cruel, it's not right. I rest my case.
Thank you, gentlemen. You were here last night, isn't it? Stand up, please. You were here last night. And I told you we have more than 19 million Kenyans, registered voters. If we allow each one of them, or any of those who want to come here, we will require a year or two to determine this kind of petition. What you do, find a way, talk to your MPs, let them give us a year or so to hear a petition like this, and we will accommodate all of you so that we hear your views. But for you to come and tell us that because we have refused to allow you to come into this petition, we are abusing your rights, I want you to also think about that and check your language. You understand? Yes, as I've told you, we have more than 19 million Kenyans. If we allow everybody, we will not move. Our position is, as we have said, we have done what we think is right, and we have dismissed your application. Thank you. Now, can we start? Let's...
Yes, my Lord.
Yes.
Good morning. In regard to the directions you have given to our application for scrutiny, We are requesting if the court can clarify a couple of things. One, that the production and scrutiny be overseen by the registrar of the court, that we be granted leave to file a report of the findings of that scrutiny, and that specific timelines be provided for the production of the or access to the material that has been granted, so that we don't lose time.
My Lord, perhaps before an order is made, my understanding of the prayer by my learned friend is to be given access. Yesterday, my Lord, before, or rather in the course of the argument, you did ask where the documents are, and we confirmed to the court that the documents are within our warehouses in Nairobi. And what I thought my learned friend asked for is access, and we are perfectly willing to give that access. I don't see why the court now should be involved in another exercise that will delay the hearing.
Mr. Ndubi.
Yes, my Lord.
We looked at your prayers very carefully. You needed access to these forms. So IBC's represented here, they are ready. Mr. Gatonye, please arrange for somebody to open where they are. Mr. Ndubi, send your representatives there, and you have access to those documents. Then you can make a report of what you have seen. And I think Mr. Gatonye,
Yeah, sorry.
I think if he wants to take a copy or two of some of those forms, please allow them to do that, so that they can, if there is anything they want to point out of that. So give them access, and if you can, avail a photocopying machine in the what?
So long, my Lord, as they undertake to pay any photocopy, any certification. Yeah.
Photocopying, you can,
It's
my Lord,
public duty.
we have already told them that they will get a certified copy of the register
At their own cost.
at their own cost, because in your replying affidavit you said it is going to cost millions to photocopy that. So Mr. Ndubi, is up to you what part of the register you want to photocopy. You can do that.
Very well. How about timelines? Because it's essential. Okay, perhaps we assume that the order is running, so we will send our people now.
Mr. Gatonye, please ask your people to avail enough staff so that this can be done and we get the report by tomorrow evening.
Most obliged.
Yes.
Thank you.
My two learned friends appear to leave us out. We are actually very, very important in that exercise. Okay. My Lord, as I understand it, so that we do not leave here and then generate other reports, is access being given. In that access, I do not see another report being done, because a report will be now evidence. We would want, number one, to be present when that is going on. As a matter of fact, if Mr. Gatonye could facilitate a recording of what is being done. Not that we impute any improper motives, but we are here to make sure everything is done correctly, so that we are not given one document which mutates into something else. We would want to be present throughout that exercise, and Mr. Gatonye should have big enough a warehouse to enable all the parties to be present.
But again, sorry, my Lord, we cannot allow a very large number of people. So perhaps my learned friend, Mr. Ndubi, can give some indication about the number of persons he wishes to send to go and have